They thought she was just another CEO, and the quiet man beside her was just a janitor. They were wrong. What happened next would leave a room of hundreds speechless, and the world watching. Before we begin, if you believe in stories where courage and kindness change everything, consider subscribing. That way, you'll never miss a moment like this. The chandelier trembled above the ballroom. Cameras flashed like heat lightning. 100 conversations turned into a hard, electric buzz. Boston's Imperial Harbor Hotel had never seen a tech conference quite like this one, and it had never seen a standoff like this. In the center of the marble lobby stood Kate Morrell, CEO of Morrell Innovations, her blazer buttoned, her chin lifted, ringed by men in fitted suits who smelled of money and cheap power. Kyle Brennan led them. His smile was all ice and teeth. "Sign it today, Kate. Your board will thank you," Kyle said, "or watch your company drown." Kate's fingers tightened around the pen she had refused to lift. She scanned faces, executives, reporters, hotel guests. No allies stepped forward. Security hovered but did not enter. The men around Kyle were the kind that made even security ask permission. Beside the coffee cart, a maintenance man wiped a drip from a chrome urn. A little girl hugged a backpack shaped like a fox. The man was Marcus Callahan. The girl was Lily. Father and daughter, stopping by on his break to return her forgotten homework to the after-school tutor upstairs. He wore work boots and a gray shirt, with his name stitched in blue. His eyes were river still. A stocky enforcer cut across the carpet. He planted a hand on Marcus's chest. "Move along, old-timer. Grown-ups are working." Marcus glanced at Lily. She listened, brow pinched, lips pressing courage into a straight line. He touched the cap of her backpack. "Stand by the cart. Count to 20. She nodded. She trusted the cadence of his voice more than anything. Marcus turned back. The enforcer smirked, cocked his shoulder, and shoved. Marcus's left hand rose in a small half-moon. The shove missed. His right palm tapped the man's elbow, turned his weight. A foot hooked behind a heel. Gravity finished the sentence. The man hit marble with a breathless thud. The lobby went silent. Even the espresso machine refused to hiss. Kyle's circle shifted. Disbelief loosened ties. Another man lunged. Marcus stepped in, shoulder tight, hips low. He guided the punch past his cheek. 2 knuckles touched a nerve above the bicep. The attacker's fingers opened like a dropped glass. The phone he held clattered. Marcus set him down. Not a single strike wasted. "Sir, please," Kate said, her voice steadied by the sight of one stranger holding a line no one else dared to draw. "This isn't necessary." "It became necessary when they boxed you in," Marcus answered. His tone carried the calm of a man who had already walked through worse storms. Kyle snapped his fingers. 4 more closed in. The lobby found its breath and used it. Some shouted, some filmed. Many watched, hungry for spectacle. Lily counted. 11, 12, 13. She traced the numbers on the Fox backpack so she would not forget. One attacker grabbed for Marcus's shirt collar. Marcus pinned the wrist. His other hand slid to the thumb. A gentle turn. The man sank to one knee with a gasp he could not swallow. The second swung wide. Marcus stepped under the arc. A palm bumped the jaw hinge. The swing died. A knee bent. Balance whispered goodbye. The third tried a bear hug from behind. Marcus sank. Hips dropped. His back became a stone the man could not lift. A heel traced the arch of a foot. The bear hugger folded. Marcus looked almost apologetic. The motion of a teacher correcting posture. He never punched. He redirected. He measured every ounce of force. He kept the furniture unbroken and the glass intact. The security team, emboldened, finally moved. Then they hesitated. The calculation of risk beat inside their ribs. Kyle stepped forward. The ice smile cracked. Cute tricks. But this is a merger, not a dojo. I'll have the hotel press charges. For what? Standing between a woman and a threat, Marcus said. Record it. I prefer accurate minutes. The crowd laughed. The sound opened a crack where courage could breathe. Kate exhaled. The pen loosened in her grip but did not fall. She studied the maintenance man, the economy of each movement, the way he kept himself between the circle and any path to her. Recognition tugged at a memory she could not place, a headline, a photograph faded by time and desert dust. Lily reached 20. She did not move. She lifted her chin and called, clear as a bell. Dad. Marcus did not look. He did not need to. The word threaded him to the world. Enough, Kyle said. He gestured. 6 more came. The suits parted like a red sea. No one believed in, but everyone obeyed. You want to play hero? Fine. Let's see how many coffee breaks you've got left. They rushed. Time narrowed. Everything sharpened. Marcus stepped. His footwork drew a small square on the marble. 4 steps that made a home. The first man arrived. Marcus's hand met the inside of a forearm. He steered it past. A shoulder bump. The man tripped over certainty and fell. The second tried to tackle. Marcus pivoted. He borrowed momentum. The tackle kissed the floor and regretted it. The third and fourth circled. Marcus let them. He heard the breath of the fifth behind him and moved 1 inch. A hand swept. The strike met nothing but air. The fifth stumbled into the fourth. Phones filmed from every angle. Someone narrated. Someone whispered a prayer. A concierge whispered an apology to the chandelier, as if it were a living thing. Call the police, Kate told a reporter who stood gawking. Call them now. Call them here. They already know me, Kyle said. He set his folder on a table as if the table belonged to him, as if the hotel did, as if the city did. They know who pays their overtime. You know who pays mine, Marcus said. He pointed to Lily with a tilt of his head. She does. In stories I will have to tell tonight about why doing right is worth it. He moved again. The square of steps. The patient breath. The discipline of water finding its path. 10 men down. Then 12. Then 15. None broken beyond pride. He avoided the edges where marble met glass. He avoided the tourists frozen into statues by awe. He avoided Kate's space, as if there were an invisible line he refused to cross without consent. The crowd's mood flipped. Fear became a strange kind of gratitude. Kyle watched. His jaw tightened. He sent the last of them, a thick wave that should have swallowed 1 man. But waves break on rocks, and Marcus was older than he looked, older than fear. A siren bled in from the street. Blue lights washed the ceiling. Security finally found its spine and began to separate bodies from egos. Marcus offered a hand to 1 groaning man. The man took it, surprised to stand with his dignity returned. Marcus brushed a scuff from his sleeve. He checked the Fox backpack. Lily raised it like a flag. Kate stepped closer. She kept her voice low. Who are you? Maintenance, Marcus said. He glanced past her to the doors where uniformed officers strode, then back to the circle where Kyle stood calculating. And a parent. Not only that, she said. The memory clicked into place. A news piece from years ago. A grainy clip of a rescue that went right when everything went wrong. A name beneath a headline. You were in Basra. Marcus's eyes gave the smallest answer. A shift. A tide turning without wind. Ma'am, maybe let the officers sort the paper before you speak the past out loud. The police entered. The lobby turned into a careful map of statements and cell phones. Kyle lifted his palms, righteous, offended. He pointed at his men. He pointed at the scuffs. Assault, property damage, intimidation. He threatened my team. He protected me. Kate said, clear, steady, the sound of a woman stepping onto her own side of the line. I will give a statement. I will give names." An officer nodded. He looked at Marcus. The look said he had met men like him in other rooms where fluorescent lights hummed. "Sir, stay handy." "I'm here," Marcus said. He touched Lily's shoulder, the small anchor he never lost. The officer noticed the child, his tone softened by a degree you measure with the heart. "We'll sort it." The conference resumed its breathing. The cameras kept recording. The hashtag was already born. Kyle collected his folder. He leaned near Kate as he passed. His whisper smelled of cologne and threat. "This isn't over. I'm not done with you." "It was never yours to start," Kate replied. She watched him go. Then she looked at Marcus. "I don't know what I would have done." "You did the hardest part," Marcus said. "You stood still. You didn't sign." Lily tugged his sleeve. "Dad, can we go home? I have a spelling quiz. Also, I counted to 20 twice." "Mission accomplished," Marcus said. The corners of his mouth warmed. He lifted the Fox backpack and placed it on her shoulders like armor. He nodded to Kate, a courteous farewell, a promise of nothing and everything. Then he turned toward the service corridor, where uniforms disappear back into the bones of a building. The officer called after him. "Mr. Callahan, we'll need your statement upstairs." Kate heard the name. It fit the headline. It fit the man. She glanced at the doors where Kyle had vanished. She felt the first calm breath she had taken all month. Then she looked at Marcus, at Lily, at the ordinary grace of a father sliding back into the quiet after standing in the storm. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. The story did not end. It turned a page. Morning light spilled through the blinds in Marcus Callahan's small kitchen, striping the worn oak table where Lily sat with her bowl of cereal. She swung her legs under the chair, humming quietly as she read the spelling list for the day. The Fox backpack hung on a hook by the door, its ears drooping like they were still sleepy. Marcus poured coffee into a dented steel mug, the kind that had followed him from deployment to deployment, then to this modest two-bedroom apartment in a quiet corner of East Boston. His life now was measured in small, deliberate routines. Wake before sunrise, fix anything broken in the building, walk Lily to school, patch drywall in apartment 4B, or replace a leaky faucet in 2C, eat dinner together, read her stories about faraway places that had nothing to do with sandstorms or night vision goggles. His toolbox was his weapon now, his uniform, a Navy work shirt with Callahan stitched over the pocket. Few people here knew or wanted to know about his past. That was how Marcus preferred it. But the incident in the hotel lobby had changed something. It had stirred whispers. At the corner cafe, 2 residents from the building leaned over their coffee cups. "I heard he dropped 4 men without breaking a sweat," said Mrs. Doyle, who'd been in the lobby yesterday to deliver muffins for the conference. "It was more than 4, her friend replied, eyes wide. "Someone posted the video online, said he moved like one of those, what do they call them? Navy SEALs." Mrs. Doyle lowered her voice. "If that's true, I'm not sure how I feel about it. You don't just walk away from being that kind of man." The remark was echoed in the laundry room later that day. "Look," said Mr. Haskins, hauling a basket of towels, "if you've been trained to take out enemies, how do we know you won't snap one day? People like that don't just go soft." "Or maybe," countered his neighbor Kendra, "people like that know better than anyone how much damage violence does. Maybe he's the safest one among us." Up in the maintenance office, Marcus pretended not to hear the fragments of conversation drifting through open doors. He kept his focus on repairing a stubborn boiler valve, though the words cut through the quiet like a slow leak. He had spent years learning to move unseen, and yet, anonymity was slipping away. Lily didn't notice the shift. To her, he was still just Dad, who packed her lunch, who remembered she liked exactly 3 strawberries in her yogurt, who could fix her bike chain with one hand while holding an umbrella in the other. That evening, as they walked home from school, she chattered about the spelling quiz and the puppy someone had brought to class. Marcus nodded in rhythm, storing each detail like treasure. When they reached their building, Mrs. Doyle was at the mailboxes. She hesitated, then smiled. "Mr. Callahan." "Marcus, I saw what you did yesterday, protecting that lady." He shifted the grocery bag in his arm. "Just stepped in when it seemed right." She studied him a moment longer, as though searching for the shadow behind the words. Well, it was something to see. Upstairs, Lily unpacked her school things, while Marcus cooked pasta. The air smelled of garlic and tomato. On the counter lay an envelope he hadn't opened. Department of Veterans Affairs. He slid it under a stack of bills, not ready to sift through old ghosts tonight. The truth was, he hadn't left the Navy SEALs because he wanted a quiet life. He'd left because a mission had gone wrong, in a way that still woke him some nights, heart pounding, ears ringing with the sound of things you can't undo. Men had been lost. Promises had been broken. The military offered him another post, but he'd looked at Lily, still small enough to sleep curled against his chest, and known the cost was too high. Now he fixed boilers and door hinges, because no one shot at you for doing that. Still, the murmur of the neighborhood's curiosity pressed in from all sides. Some looked at him with a kind of respect they didn't voice. Others eyed him like a storm cloud over the horizon. The contrast was sharp, and it stirred a tension he thought he had left behind overseas. The knowledge that not everyone wants a protector, even when danger is real. Later, after dinner, Marcus stepped onto the balcony. The city hummed beyond the rooftops. Somewhere, a siren wailed, fading into the night. Lily's laughter floated from the living room where she played with the neighbor's cat. He leaned on the railing, breathing in the cool air. Staying in the shadows had been the safest choice. For her, for him. But shadows had a way of shifting when someone shone a light your way. And Kate Morrell, the woman in the lobby, had looked at him as though she knew he was more than the man who fixed leaky faucets. The thought unsettled him in a way no fight ever had. The late afternoon sun filtered through the glass walls of Morrell Innovations' executive floor, casting long amber streaks across the polished wood. The hum of the air conditioning was steady, though the vents had been groaning all week. That was why Marcus Callahan was there, kneeling beside a ceiling panel with his toolbox open, his work shirt sleeves rolled up. From this vantage point, tucked into the corner near the service ladder, he was invisible to the conversation happening on the other side of the room. Kate Morrell stood at the head of the long conference table. Even in the waning light, her presence was undeniable. Crisp white blazer, tailored slacks, hair swept back with a precision that mirrored her posture. Across from her sat Kyle Brennan, a man whose tailored suit and easy smile could not mask the sharpness in his eyes. "I'm offering you a way out, Kate," Kyle said, his voice smooth but edged. "Sign the acquisition papers, and Morrell Innovations becomes part of our portfolio. Your shareholders will see immediate returns. You'll walk away with your reputation intact." Kate's chin lifted slightly. "Your portfolio is built on opacity and shell companies. I know how you move funds, Kyle, and I will not be a part of laundering money under the guise of innovation." A slow smile spread across Kyle's face. "Careful, Kate. Throwing around words like that could be costly." Marcus tightened the screws on the vent cover, though his focus wasn't on the metal. The tone in Kyle's voice was one he'd heard before, half promise, half threat. Out in the field, men who talked like that rarely left you a choice. "You've built something remarkable," Kyle continued, leaning forward. "But every castle has its cracks, and I know exactly where yours are." Kate's fingers rested lightly on the back of a chair, but her knuckles were pale. "If you think intimidation will change my mind, you don't know me as well as you think." For a moment, the air in the room seemed to hold its breath. I know enough, Kyle said, gathering his papers. And I know that people under pressure make mistakes. I'll be in touch. He stood, brushing past an assistant who had been sitting silently near the far wall, and left with the confident stride of a man, convinced the outcome was inevitable. When the door closed, Kate exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping in a way that shattered the image Marcus had seen in the hotel lobby. She wasn't the untouchable CEO surrounded by admirers and critics. She was a woman standing alone in the middle of a battlefield no one else could see. Marcus slid the vent cover back into place and descended the ladder quietly. The metallic click of his toolbox latches made her glance up. "I didn't realize anyone was still here," she said, straightening. "Just finishing the AC repair," Marcus replied, keeping his tone even. It was making that grinding noise. Her eyes searched his for a moment, as if trying to gauge how much he'd heard. "Did you catch any of that?" He shrugged lightly. "Enough to know it's not my business, but also enough to know he doesn't sound like someone who plays fair." A faint smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, though it didn't reach her eyes. That's one way to put it. She gathered her laptop and papers, sliding them into a sleek leather case. "Thank you for fixing the AC. It's been suffocating in here lately." "Air should flow better now," he said, closing his toolbox. He hesitated, then added, "Pressure has a way of making people forget to breathe." Her gaze lingered on him for half a second longer than necessary, and then she was gone, heels clicking down the hall. Marcus watched her disappear into the elevator, the reflection of the city skyline swallowing her silhouette. For the first time, he saw past the corporate armor she wore. Underneath was someone carrying more weight than her frame should have to bear. Back in the maintenance closet, Marcus leaned against the shelves stacked with filters and light bulbs. He had no interest in corporate wars, but the look in Kate's eyes, part defiance, part fatigue, stuck with him. He'd seen that expression in mirrors overseas, in the faces of people trying to hold ground. They had no reinforcements to defend. He told himself it wasn't his fight. But a quiet truth stirred in the back of his mind. Sometimes, you don't get to choose when the fight comes to you. The smell of diesel and dust hit Marcus before the sound reached him. Rotors cutting through the thick night air over Basra. The world was washed in green through his NVGs, the heat of bodies glowing faint against the cold concrete. He crouched behind a crumbling wall, the pulse of adrenaline steady in his ears. 2 minutes, whispered Chief Daniels over the comms. His voice was low, but it carried the unshakable certainty of a man who'd done this 100 times. Marcus was on point. Daniels was right behind him. The plan was simple. Get in, extract the hostages, get out. From their overwatch, they had eyes on the building, a squat warehouse with a single flickering bulb above the door. Inside were 3 civilians, aid workers from a medical NGO, bound and guarded by 6 armed men. The call had come in at 400. By 4:15, Marcus's team was already airborne. The other element that night was a civilian contractor group hired for intel support. Their lead was a tall, sharp-featured man with a grin that never reached his eyes. Kyle Brennan. Marcus had never liked working alongside private operators. Too often, they answered to a paycheck instead of a mission. But orders were orders. The breach was clean. Marcus slipped through the entry first, weapon up, heart rate steady. The team fanned out, movements silent and precise. Daniels was at his shoulder. 2 guards went down before they could raise an alarm. The hostages' eyes went wide with relief as Marcus cut the ties around their wrists. Then it happened. A burst of gunfire erupted from the far side of the warehouse. Too close, too sudden. The overwatch position was compromised. Marcus heard the crackle of the radio, Brennan's voice sharp with panic. "They're all over us. We're pulling back." "Negative," Daniels barked. "Hold position until—" But Brennan was already gone. Through the dusty windows, Marcus caught sight of the contractors scrambling into their vehicle, leaving their flank wide open. The enemy poured through the gap. A round caught Daniels high in the chest. Marcus dragged him into cover, his hand slick with blood. "Go!" Daniels rasped, shoving Marcus toward the hostages. "Get them out!" "I'm not leaving you." "That's an order, Callahan." Marcus hesitated only long enough to seal Daniels' wound with a field dressing before shoving the civilians toward the extraction point. Behind him, the gunfire grew frantic. The last thing he heard before the Black Hawk lifted off was the dull, sickening silence where his friend's voice had been. Daniels never made it out. That night rewrote Marcus's life. He filed the after-action report, naming the lapse in support that had cost them dearly. But the contractors had vanished into the shadows of private security work. Brennan's name was scrubbed from any official mention. Marcus stayed in for another year, but something in him had shifted. The weight of that night, of leaving Daniels behind, was heavier than any gear he'd carried. When Lily was born, he walked away from the Navy SEALs. He told himself he was done with combat, with betrayal, with the kind of men who abandoned others to save themselves. Until now. In the empty maintenance hallway of Morel Innovations, Marcus leaned against the wall, the echoes of that night in Basra still pounding in his head. He had recognized Kyle's voice before he'd even processed the words. Smooth, confident, coated with the same false charm he'd heard through a crackling radio years ago. The man sitting across from Kate Morel was the same one who'd left Daniels to die. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had built his life around the idea that he would never again cross paths with Kyle Brennan, that the past could stay buried under the quiet routines of school drop-offs and boiler repairs. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. He could have walked away, should have walked away. Kate's corporate war was none of his business. Yet, the thought of Brennan tightening a grip around her company stirred something primal in him. He had seen the cost of letting a man like that dictate the terms of a fight. The faces of the Basra hostages flickered in his memory. The weight of Daniels's blood on his hands returned like it had never left. Marcus closed his eyes, forcing the memories back into the dark corners they came from. But the damage was done. The past wasn't just knocking, it had already stepped inside. And Marcus Callahan knew one truth better than anyone. When a predator sets its sights on a target, you either stand aside or you stand in the way. The hotel lobby cafe was quieter than usual that morning, the hum of conversation softened by the plush carpets and low jazz playing through hidden speakers. Marcus sat at a small corner table, Lily perched on the chair beside him with a steaming cup of hot chocolate. She wore her favorite sweatshirt, the one with a faded astronaut patch on the front, and her legs swung freely above the floor. Kate Morel approached the counter, phone in one hand, ordering a black coffee with the kind of decisiveness that made people step aside. She caught Marcus's eye across the room, and after a beat, walked over. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. Marcus gestured to the empty chair. "Sure, just don't expect great conversation before I've finished my first coffee." Kate smirked as she sat down. "Noted." Lily looked between them, curiosity lighting her face. "Are you the boss of the big office upstairs?" Kate's brows lifted in mild surprise. "I suppose you could say that. I run a company." "What kind of company?" Lily leaned forward, elbows on the table like she was conducting an interview. "We work on developing technology that helps other businesses run more efficiently," Kate explained, softening her tone. "It's a lot of meetings, decisions, and sometimes headaches." "That sounds important," Lily said, her voice tinged with awe. Kate's smile was small but genuine, a crack in the carefully built walls she usually carried. "It is important, but sometimes I forget why I started it in the first place." Marcus took a sip of his coffee, watching her over the rim of the mug. "Maybe it's like anything else. You start out knowing exactly why, but somewhere along the way, the noise drowns out the reason. You just have to listen for it again." Kate glanced at him, as if trying to read something in his tone. "And you speak from experience?" "Let's just say I've had a few detours in life," Marcus replied, leaving it at that. The moment hung between them, light, but tinged with an unspoken understanding. Lily piped up again, grinning. "Do you ever get scared being the boss?" Kate chuckled. "All the time. But you keep going, even when you're scared. That's how you grow." Lily nodded solemnly, as though she'd been handed an important secret. From across the lobby, a man in a dark blazer lingered near a potted plant, holding a phone angled just enough to capture the trio at the table. His thumb tapped the screen twice, snapping a photo before he turned away, disappearing into the elevator. Kate didn't notice, but Marcus did. His eyes tracked the man just long enough to memorize his face. He didn't recognize him, but he knew the type. Kyle's kind of type. The opportunistic shadow that follows wherever leverage can be found. "Something wrong?" Kate asked, picking up on the subtle shift in his expression. "Nothing worth ruining coffee over," Marcus said, masking his tone. But in his mind, he could already see where this would go. The right photo in the wrong hands could turn into the perfect piece of gossip. The powerful CEO seen getting cozy with the building's maintenance guy. He could almost hear the headline already. Morel's secret romance, from boardroom to break room. It would be ridiculous, of course, but he knew the media game. Perception was reality. Kyle didn't need the story to be true. He just needed it to spread. Kate stirred her coffee, oblivious to the quiet storm Marcus could feel building. "You know, Lily, I think you'd make a good interviewer. You ask better questions than most reporters I've met." Lily beamed. "I just like knowing how people do what they do." Kate laughed softly, the sound pulling something unexpectedly warm from Marcus's chest. He hadn't heard her laugh before. Not like that. When they finished their drinks, Kate stood. "Thank you for letting me crash your table. It was nice." Marcus nodded. "Anytime." As she walked away, Marcus felt the tug of two conflicting instincts. One told him to keep his head down and stay out of whatever game Kyle was playing. The other reminded him of Basra, of what happens when you let someone like Kyle set the rules. And as the man with the camera no doubt prepared to deliver his photo, Marcus realized something. The first move had already been made. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Tremont Street, the kind that made Boston's historic buildings look taller and narrower. Kate walked with her assistant, Karen, toward the parking garage, her heels clicking a steady rhythm on the pavement. Her phone buzzed with a string of unanswered calls from her legal team. She ignored them for now. Up ahead, 3 men in black leather jackets stepped casually into her path. They weren't random pedestrians. Their formation was deliberate. 1 in front, 2 flanking, each with the coiled energy of men who enjoyed making others feel small. The leader, a stocky man with a jagged scar along his jawline, smirked. "Miss Morel, Kyle Brennan sends his regards." Karen froze beside her. Kate's pulse quickened, but she kept her chin high. "Tell Kyle I don't take meetings in the street." "That's fine," the scarred man replied. "We can talk here. Maybe help you understand what happens when people say no to him." His hand rested casually on the front of his jacket, too casual for comfort. From across the street, Marcus had been finishing a maintenance call at a nearby building. He spotted the small crowd from half a block away. Something in the posture of those men, too close, too focused, pulled him toward them without conscious thought. "Kate," Marcus called, his voice cutting through the tension. The scarred man glanced over his shoulder. "And who's this? The help?" Marcus didn't answer. He closed the distance, his gaze sweeping over the group. "You boys lost? This isn't the kind of neighborhood that welcomes your extracurriculars." The second man, taller with tattooed hands, stepped forward. "Back off, old man. This is between us and the lady." Marcus's eyes hardened. "Here's the thing. You want to talk to her? You go through me." The tattooed man reached for Marcus's shoulder, a gesture meant to shove him aside. It never landed. In a blur, Marcus caught the man's wrist, twisted it outward, and with a pivot of his hip, sent him stumbling into the brick wall. The leader lunged, swinging a heavy punch, but Marcus slipped inside the arc, delivering a palm strike to the chest that sent the man staggering backward, gasping for air. The third man hesitated, a flicker of calculation in his eyes, before charging forward. Marcus sidestepped, caught his collar, and yanked him off balance, guiding his momentum to the sidewalk. It was controlled, efficient, and over in seconds. Pedestrians slowed, unsure whether to intervene or record on their phones. Marcus stood over the group, voice low, but carrying weight. "If I see any of you near her again, you'll leave with more than bruised egos. Now disappear." The scarred man muttered something under his breath, pulling his friends up. They limped toward a side alley, throwing occasional glares over their shoulders. Karen exhaled sharply. What just happened?" Kate turned to Marcus, her expression a mix of gratitude and sharp curiosity. "You didn't just happen to be nearby, did you?" "I was in the area," Marcus said, adjusting the strap of his tool bag. "Lucky timing." "Lucky timing doesn't explain what I just saw," she pressed. "Those moves, those aren't from fixing air conditioners." Marcus looked away, scanning the street as if expecting trouble to return. "It's not important." "It is to me," Kate countered. "You just dismantled 3 men in less time than it takes to tie a shoelace. That's not nothing." Marcus met her eyes for a brief moment, then broke the contact. "Let's just say I've dealt with worse. You should head home, and maybe take a different route for a while." Kate wanted to push further, but something in his tone made her stop. It wasn't secrecy for the sake of drama. It was the kind of silence born from scars you don't reopen without reason. As they walked toward the garage, the city noise swelled around them. Kate's mind spun with questions she couldn't shake. Who exactly was Marcus Callahan? And why did she get the feeling that if she found out, her entire world might tilt in ways she couldn't predict? The morning headlines hit like a gut punch. Morel Innovations in freefall? Sources say CEO losing grip. The words were splashed across business blogs, whispered in boardrooms, and dissected on morning talk shows. Kate's phone lit up with messages from investors and executives, some feigning concern, others sharpening their knives. In the boardroom, the pressure was palpable. Men and women in tailored suits leaned forward over the polished mahogany table, their eyes on her, like she was both the cause of and solution to their panic. "Kate, the optics are terrible," said Gregson, the oldest member of the board. "This rumor about you entertaining a building maintenance worker? It undermines your credibility." Kate's jaw tightened. "Marcus Callahan is a resident in the same building. That's all." "It doesn't matter," another member cut in. "Perception is reality. If the media believes you're distracted, the market will believe it too." Kyle Brennan is already circling. That last sentence was the one they didn't need to say. She could feel Kyle's shadow on every corner of her life now. By afternoon, the invitation arrived. Kyle Brennan wanted to meet during the Tech Horizons conference at the Imperial Hotel, a glittering, high-profile event that attracted every player in the industry. His message was simple. "Let's find you a way out before the board does it for you." Kate knew a way out meant surrender. Still, she accepted. If Kyle wanted a stage, she'd meet him there. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus was leaning over an open control panel in the Imperial's grand ballroom, checking wiring for the spotlight rig. The hotel had brought him in for last-minute repairs ahead of the conference. He didn't care much for tech gatherings, but the Imperial was one of those jobs you took without question. It paid well and quickly. The ballroom was an opulent sweep of marble and gold leaf. the kind of place where everything gleamed under chandeliers the size of small cars. Marcus worked quietly, halfway up a ladder, when the sound of heels clicked sharply across the polished floor. Kate stepped into the room, her navy dress tailored to perfection, hair swept back in a style that said she'd come to win, even if she was walking into enemy territory. Behind her, Kyle Brennan followed with the confidence of a man who thought the world was already his. They stopped near the center of the room. "Kate," Kyle said, his voice carrying a false warmth. "You look stunning, as always." "Cut the flattery," she replied. "What do you want?" "I want to give you an out. Sell to me now before the board forces it. You'll walk away with your reputation intact and a very comfortable payout." "My reputation's intact because I built this company from nothing," Kate shot back. "I'm not selling it to a man who launders his ego through venture capital." Kyle's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Careful. I can make the board believe whatever I need them to. And the press? They eat what I feed them. That little photo of you and your janitor friend? It's just the appetizer." Up on the ladder, Marcus's wrench froze mid-turn. Janitor friend. The words rolled in his head, colder than they sounded. Kate crossed her arms. "Is that why you had your men block me in the street? Intimidation doesn't work on me." Kyle stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This isn't intimidation. This is inevitability." Before Kate could answer, Marcus descended the ladder, each step deliberate. "Funny thing about inevitability," he said, voice calm but edged with steel. "It tends to disappear when someone's willing to fight for what matters." Kyle turned, feigning surprise. "Well, if it isn't the man of the hour, you really do get around." Marcus didn't blink, and you really don't know when to stop. For a moment, the ballroom seemed smaller, the air tighter. Kyle's 2 security men appeared at the doorway, watching. Kate looked from one to the other, sensing something deeper beneath Marcus's steady tone. She didn't know what history lay between them, but she could see the way Marcus's jaw tightened, the way Kyle's smirk faltered just slightly. Marcus set down his tool bag. "You've had your conversation. Now leave her alone." Kyle chuckled. "Or what? You'll fix my light fixtures to death?" Marcus stepped forward, not fast, not aggressive, but with the kind of controlled presence that shifted the energy in the room. "You don't want to find out." The security men took a step forward, but Kyle raised a hand, stopping them. His smirk returned, though thinner now. "Enjoy the conference, Kate. We'll talk soon." As Kyle walked out, Marcus's eyes followed him until the doors closed. Only then did he turn to Kate. "You didn't have to step in," she said quietly. "Yes," Marcus replied, picking up his tools again. "I did." She studied him for a long moment, the gears in her mind turning faster than the clock above the ballroom doors. For the first time, she wondered if Marcus Callahan wasn't just a bystander in her story. He might be the key to surviving it. The Imperial Hotel's lobby was all glass and marble, a cathedral of light framed by towering columns. Guests drifted between the reception desk and the grand staircase, their chatter blending with the faint hum of a string quartet playing near the bar. The conference was in full swing upstairs, but down here, something else was about to unfold. Marcus stepped out of the ballroom with Kate at his side, his tool bag slung casually over one shoulder. She had her jaw set in that same determined line he'd seen before. Whatever Kyle had said to her in their meeting had only hardened her resolve. Unfortunately, Kyle wasn't finished. From the mezzanine, Kyle leaned over the railing, his phone in hand. His eyes locked on Marcus, and the smirk that followed was slow and deliberate. He made a small gesture with his free hand, 2 fingers curled, a quick flick toward the lobby. The first 3 men appeared from the far end of the hall. They weren't guests. Their broad shoulders strained against black jackets, and their eyes had the kind of restless scan Marcus recognized instantly. private security, but not the licensed, rule-bound kind. These were muscle for hire, and their posture said they were itching for permission. Kate's breath caught. "Marcus, stay behind me," he said, voice even. The first man lunged. Marcus sidestepped, catching the attacker's wrist and twisting it until the man's knees buckled. A single palm strike to the sternum sent him staggering into a column. The second came in low, but Marcus pivoted, using the man's momentum to send him sprawling across the polished floor. Gasps rippled through the lobby. A few bystanders pulled out their phones. The third man reached for Marcus's throat, but Marcus ducked under the arm, snapping it into a lock and pushing the man into his fallen partner. They both hit the marble with a bone-jarring thud. Up on the mezzanine, Kyle's smirk faltered. He tapped something into his phone. The next wave came fast. 7 men this time. Marcus adjusted his stance, feeling the rhythm of the room. A rolling cart stacked with silver trays caught his eye. He shoved it into the path of one attacker, then used its momentum to swing himself into a flying kick at another. It was a strange kind of music, boots scuffing marble, the ring of metal trays, the sharp exhalations of strikes landed clean. Kate's eyes followed him as he moved. He was precise but fluid, as if every movement had been rehearsed 1,000 times. She'd seen trained fighters before, but this was different. There was no wasted effort, no theatrics, only pure efficiency. Someone in the crowd shouted, "He's taking them all!" and laughter mingled with cheers. Kyle's face tightened. "All right," he muttered into his phone. "Send everyone." The elevator doors opened, and they poured out. Black jackets, heavy boots, dozens of them. 15 became 20, then 30. By the time the last group pushed through the revolving doors from the street, there were 50 men circling Marcus. A lesser man might have frozen. Marcus just breathed out slowly, loosening his shoulders. "Last chance," he said, scanning the circle. "Walk away." No one moved. The first charge came from his left. Marcus sidestepped, hooked a leg, and swept the attacker to the ground. 2 more came from the right. He ducked low, grabbed the edge of a velvet rope stand, and spun it like a quarterstaff, driving both men back into the fountain. Water splashed across the marble. Someone grabbed him from behind. Marcus dropped his weight, slammed an elbow into the man's ribs, and rolled free. A coffee table became a shield, a chair, a battering ram. He moved like water around rocks, never staying in one place long enough to be caught. Phones were everywhere now, recording from every angle. The hashtag, "Seal in the lobby," began to trend before the fight was even halfway over. One by one, they fell. Some groaning on the floor, others crawling toward the exits. Marcus's breathing stayed steady, his movements deliberate. He wasn't fighting to punish. He was fighting to end this quickly, without lethal force. The final man, a hulking brute with hands the size of dinner plates, hesitated as he looked around at the bodies on the marble. Marcus didn't rush him. He just stepped forward and met the man's eyes. That was enough. The brute raised his palms and backed away. Silence settled over the lobby, broken only by the sound of dripping water from the fountain. Marcus straightened, scanning the room. Kate was still by the column where he'd left her, eyes wide, hand over her mouth. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Who are you?" Before he could answer, a dozen voices in the crowd chanted, "Seal! Seal! Seal!" And the clips kept rolling. Somewhere upstairs, Kyle realized he had just lost control of the narrative, and maybe more than that. The Imperial Hotel lobby smelled faintly of spilt coffee and fountain water. The marble floor was a mosaic of footprints, toppled chairs, and scattered silver trays. Men in black jackets groaned as they were helped to their feet or slumped against the walls. The crowd's excited murmur shifted abruptly when the first wail of sirens pierced the air outside. Marcus stood in the center of it all, breathing evenly, his eyes sweeping the room, not for threats now, but for Kate and Lily. Kate was still by the column, her hands clasped tight in front of her. Lily was safe, standing just behind her, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and confusion. The revolving doors spun open, and uniformed officers poured in, hands on holsters. The commanding officer's voice boomed. "Everyone freeze! Step away from each other!" Marcus raised his hands calmly, palms out. He'd seen enough tense standoffs to know how quickly things could turn. The officers fanned out, speaking into radios, eyes darting between the groaning men and the tall, broad-shouldered man who seemed to be the only one still standing without injury. Kyle descended from the mezzanine like a man walking into his own stage. His suit jacket was immaculate, his tie perfectly straight. He strode up to the lead officer, jabbing a finger toward Marcus. "That's him. He's the one who caused all this. He attacked my security detail unprovoked," Kyle said, his voice sharp and controlled. Marcus didn't flinch. "Your security detail came at me. I defended myself, and I defended her." He nodded toward Kate. Kyle's lips curled into something between a smirk and a snarl. "That woman is my business associate, and you're nothing but a building janitor with a hero complex. You assaulted 50 men. That's not self-defense, that's a public safety threat." The officer's brow furrowed as he looked from one man to the other. "We'll get statements from everyone." From the crowd, voices began to rise, some in Marcus's defense, others echoing Kyle's accusation. "I saw him take them all down, like some Navy guy," one man said. Another shook his head. "I don't care what he is. You don't fight 50 people like that unless you're dangerous." The murmur of disagreement swelled. A few of Kyle's supporters in tailored suits began speaking loudly about reckless violence, property damage, and endangering bystanders. Their tone carried an air of authority, and the officers' pens moved quickly over their notepads. Kate stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble. She positioned herself between Marcus and the officers, her voice cutting through the noise. "This man saved my life," she said, looking each officer in the eye, "and not just mine." Years ago, overseas, Marcus Callahan was part of a Navy SEAL unit that rescued 12 hostages from a warlord's compound in Somalia. One of those hostages was an American diplomat's child. He risked his life and nearly didn't make it out. That is who you're talking about arresting. The lobby went still. Even some of Kyle's supporters turned their heads toward Marcus with new interest. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He'd never wanted that story told, especially not here, not now. But Kate's voice was unwavering. "He is not a threat," she continued. "He is the reason no one here is in the hospital right now. If you want to make an arrest, start with the man who sent 50 hired thugs into a hotel lobby to intimidate a woman doing her job." Kyle's smirk vanished, replaced by a tight, pale line. "Careful, Kate," he said under his breath, but not so quietly that Marcus couldn't hear. The commanding officer looked down at his notepad, then back up at Marcus. "Sir, we're going to need your statement." "And yours," he added, nodding to Kate. "We'll also be reviewing the hotel's security footage." Kyle's jaw worked, but he said nothing. As the officers began escorting the injured men outside, the crowd's tone shifted again. Several onlookers approached Marcus, murmuring words like "incredible" and "thank you." A few patted him on the shoulder as they passed, but there were still murmurs from others, whispers about whether someone capable of that level of force could really be safe to have around. Marcus caught Kate's gaze. There was gratitude in her eyes, but also a quiet understanding of the cost of what she'd just revealed. She had cracked open the sealed box of his past, and now the contents were spilling into the present. Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, are they mad at you?" Marcus crouched down to her level, forcing a smile. Some people don't understand what happened, Sweet Pea. But the truth always comes out. As the officers took their notes and the lobby slowly cleared, Marcus realized that whatever happened next, this wasn't going away. Kyle would make sure of it, and now the city knew the man in the shadows wasn't just a quiet maintenance worker. The glass facade of Morel Innovations gleamed under the late afternoon sun, its surface catching and scattering light like a beacon over Boston's financial district. The company's headquarters was all clean lines and sharp edges, but inside, the air was heavy with tension. Kate Morel strode through the lobby with purpose, Marcus walking a step behind her, Lily holding onto his hand. The receptionist's eyes flicked toward Marcus, clearly recognizing him from the grainy hotel lobby videos already making the rounds online under the hashtag Seal in the Lobby. Still, she kept her composure, giving Kate a respectful nod as the trio passed. Kate led them to the executive elevator, swiped her access card, and waited for the doors to close before speaking. "I need someone I can trust, Marcus. After what happened at the Imperial, I can't ignore the fact that Kyle's willing to escalate. He's not going to stop at intimidation. He's going to find another way in." Marcus glanced down at Lily, who was quietly studying the glowing floor numbers. "You've got security," he said evenly. "What makes you think you need me?" Kate's eyes didn't waver. "Because my security team works for a paycheck. You acted because you care, and because you know exactly the kind of man Kyle is." The elevator dinged, opening to a floor lined with glass-walled conference rooms. Kate led Marcus into her office, a broad corner space with panoramic views of the harbor. She gestured to the leather chairs opposite her desk. "Sit," she said, her tone softening. "Please, I want to offer you a position here, as my head of security. But before you answer, I need to know exactly what happened back then. Not the rumors, the truth." Marcus stayed standing for a long moment, weighing the cost of pulling the curtain back. For years, he'd kept the past sealed away, not because he couldn't talk about it, but because he'd learned the hard way what came with the telling: judgment, scrutiny, and the reopening of wounds that had never fully healed. But the image of Kyle's smug grin at the Imperial lingered, and Kate's eyes, steadfast, unwavering, reminded him of the comrades he'd once sworn to protect. He took the seat. "Basra, 2014. We were tasked with extracting 2 captured aid workers from a warehouse near the southern docks. My SEAL team went in coordinated. Intel said there'd be light resistance. Turned out it was a setup. 40 armed men, traps wired in every entry point. And Kyle Brennan." Kate's brow furrowed. "Kyle was there?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Private contractor, supposedly there to provide backup. He was being paid by the same agency that gave us the intel. When the first shots went off, Kyle and his men pulled out. Left us with no exit route, no cover, and the enemy closing in." His voice stayed calm, but the tension in his jaw told its own story. "One of my closest friends, Lieutenant Eric Hart, took a round to the chest. We got the hostages out, but Eric didn't make it. And the next day, the official report said Kyle's team had been compromised and forced to retreat." Kate leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the desk. "And no one challenged it." "Not in a way that stuck," Marcus said. "People like Kyle know how to bury the truth under layers of bureaucracy and well-placed favors. I left the SEALs 6 months later. I told myself it was for Lily, but part of it was 'cause I couldn't stand to wear the same uniform that got twisted into his shield." Kate sat back, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice low but steady. "If what you're saying is true, and I believe it is, then protecting you isn't just about loyalty. It's about protecting the truth. If Kyle's willing to betray soldiers in the field, he's capable of anything in the boardroom." Marcus studied her. You realize what happens if you side with me openly. He'll come after you harder." "I'm already in his crosshairs," Kate replied. "The difference is now, I'm not standing there alone." For the first time since entering her office, Marcus allowed a faint smile to tug at the corner of his mouth. "If I take this job, I do it my way. That means no politics, no press briefings, and no interference when I tell you something needs to happen. Agreed?" Kate met his gaze without hesitation. Agreed. Lily, who had been quietly coloring in a notebook Kate's assistant had given her, looked up. "Does that mean you're going to be like a superhero now, Daddy?" Marcus chuckled, ruffling her hair. "Not exactly, kiddo. More like someone who makes sure the bad guys don't win." Kate's phone buzzed sharply on the desk. She glanced at the screen, her jaw tightening. "It's the board. They want an emergency meeting tomorrow. Kyle's pushing for a vote to strip me of certain operational controls." Marcus rose from his chair. "Then I guess we start tonight." Kate handed him a temporary security badge. The weight of it felt heavier than plastic should. This wasn't just about guarding a CEO. It was about stepping back into a fight Marcus thought he'd left behind. But this time, the battlefield wasn't sand and dust. It was glass, steel, and high-stakes corporate power. As he slid the badge into his pocket, Marcus knew one thing with absolute certainty. Protecting Kate wasn't just the right thing to do. It was personal. The marble floors of the Harrington Hotel's grand ballroom gleamed under the chandelier's light, each crystal catching a flicker of gold. The press had already gathered, their cameras lined up like a firing squad aimed at the small stage at the far end. Kyle Brennan stood there, broad smile fixed in place, shaking hands with select reporters as if this were his coronation. Kate Morrell entered alone, or at least that's how it seemed. She wore a tailored navy dress, her posture regal, eyes steady. She'd been invited to sign a reconciliation agreement, an olive branch, Kyle had called it, but the entire setup reeked of a trap. She knew the headlines he wanted: CEO surrenders. Near the back of the room, a side door opened quietly. Marcus Callahan slipped in, Lily walking close beside him. He'd traded his usual maintenance attire for a dark blazer and pressed shirt, but the way he scanned the room, measuring exits, reading body language, betrayed his training. Kate stepped up to the small podium as Kyle leaned toward her microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice dripping with charm. "Today marks a turning point. After some misunderstandings, I'm pleased to say Ms. Morrell has agreed to join forces with Brennan Capital for the good of Morrell Innovations and its investors." A murmur ran through the press row. The camera's red lights blinked to life. Kate's heart pounded, but she didn't speak. She knew her moment hadn't arrived yet. Kyle gestured toward the table at the center of the stage, where a stack of documents sat beside 2 pens. "All we need now is a signature," he said, turning that smile toward Kate. From the back, Marcus moved forward, calm, deliberate. Lily kept pace until he guided her toward a trusted hotel staffer waiting near the aisle. Then he mounted the stage without invitation. Kyle's smile faltered. "This is a private." Marcus's voice cut clean through the room. "Private? With every major media outlet in Boston here? Sounds like you wanted witnesses." He turned toward the crowd. "Good. You should all see this." From inside his blazer, Marcus produced a small tablet. He tapped the screen, and the ballroom's projector flickered to life, filling the wall behind them with grainy video footage. The first clip was from the hotel lobby just weeks ago. Marcus standing between Kate and a swarm of Kyle's hired men. The audience gasped as they watched him dismantle attackers with precision. But before the momentum could shift to hero worship, Marcus switched to the next file. It was military helmet cam footage, the timestamp reading Basra 2014. The perspective was frantic. Gunfire, shouts, the heavy breathing of a soldier sprinting through a narrow corridor. Then came the unmistakable image of Kyle Brennan in full tactical gear, glancing back toward the camera before ducking through a side door. Seconds later, an explosion rocked the feed, followed by shouts for medics. Marcus's voice overrode the audio. "That's Kyle, contracted to support our SEAL team. He had a choice, to help cover our retreat or to save himself. He chose himself. Lieutenant Eric Hart died buying the time Kyle stole." A reporter shouted from the crowd, "Where did you get this footage?" "It was classified," Marcus said. But when a man like this tries to destroy lives in peacetime, the way he did in war, the truth matters more than the paper it's printed on. Kyle's face flushed deep red. "This is slander." Marcus advanced a step, his voice steady, measured. "It's evidence, and it's not the only piece." He swiped again, and a spreadsheet appeared, its columns filled with dates, shell company names, and wire transfers. Money funneled through overseas accounts that traced back to Brennan Capital. Kate took over, her voice ringing with authority. "Kyle has been using his fund to launder money for arms dealers. When I refused to partner with him, he tried to break me, professionally, personally. But he made one mistake. He underestimated the people willing to stand up against him." The room erupted, reporters firing questions, camera shutters clicking like machine gun fire. Kyle tried to shout over them, but the swell of voices drowned him out. Uniformed officers stepped through the crowd, their badges catching the light. One approached the stage, speaking directly to Kyle. "Mr. Brennan, we have a warrant for your arrest." Kyle's eyes darted toward the exits, but Marcus moved slightly, cutting off his path. There was no aggression in his stance, only the quiet certainty of a man who had already fought his battles and wasn't afraid of one more. The officers took Kyle by the arms and led him down the steps. As they did, one of the reporters turned to Marcus. "Why come forward now?" He glanced at Kate before answering. "Because the truth is only useful if it's in the open. And because some debts," he paused, his gaze hardening for just a moment, "are worth paying in full." Kate stepped to Marcus's side, her presence both steady and proud. In the sea of chaos, flashes, shouts, the ripple of breaking news, there was an unspoken understanding between them. The war Kyle had started was over, but their fight for what came next had only begun. Lily ran up the aisle, weaving through the crowd until she reached them. She slipped her small hand into Marcus's, looking up with wide eyes. "Did we win, Daddy?" Marcus crouched, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We told the truth. That's the only win that matters." Kate placed a hand on his shoulder. "And you didn't just protect me. You gave this company, and everyone in it, a chance to breathe again." As the last of the camera lights faded and the officers disappeared with their prisoner, the three of them stepped down from the stage together. Outside, the city buzzed with news alerts and whispers of scandal. Inside, for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt something heavier than fear or anger. He felt the first stirrings of peace. The morning after the Harrington Hotel confrontation, Boston awoke to a storm of headlines. Every news station, every business outlet, every corner of social media buzzed with the same name, Marcus Callahan. Clips of him dismantling Kyle's men in the lobby replayed on a loop. Commentators dissected his every move, some marveling at his precision, others fixating on the cool, almost a surgical calm in his eyes. But it wasn't just the fight that caught the public's imagination. It was the footage of the Basra mission, the revelation of Kyle's betrayal, and the quiet dignity with which Marcus had laid the truth bare. SEAL in the lobby had exploded into a phenomenon. Memes circulated, some comical, others reverent, while veterans groups hailed Marcus as a hero who had finally exposed the rot that sometimes festered in power. Morel Innovations stock, which had been teetering on the brink, surged 12 points in a single day. Investors who had once wavered called to reaffirm their support. In a press conference outside her company's headquarters, Kate stood before the microphones, flanked by senior staff. "Marcus Callahan didn't just protect me," she told the reporters. "He stood for truth when it was easier to stay silent. He reminded all of us that integrity is worth fighting for." Her voice wavered slightly on the last line, not from nerves, but from the weight of sincerity. Across town, Marcus wasn't watching. He sat in a small park near the Charles River, Lily swinging on a creaky set of monkey bars. The crisp air carried the scent of damp leaves and faint traces of the ocean. Marcus nursed a paper cup of coffee, dressed in the same unassuming clothes he always wore. His phone sat in his pocket, vibrating every few minutes with calls, texts, and notifications he had no intention of answering. A young man in a hoodie approached hesitantly. You're that guy, right? The Navy SEAL from the hotel?" Marcus gave him a polite nod. "Used to be. Now I'm just a dad trying to keep his coffee warm." The stranger grinned awkwardly. "Well, thanks for everything you did. My brother served, and it means something, you know?" Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Tell your brother I said welcome home." Then he leaned back on the bench, eyes tracking Lily as she jumped off the bars with a triumphant laugh. To Marcus, this, her smile, the ordinary rhythm of a day with his daughter, was the only victory that mattered. Fame was a passing shadow. Peace, however, was hard-earned. But peace was not something Kate seemed ready to leave in his hands alone. That afternoon, her car pulled up to the curb by the park. She stepped out, trading her CEO armor for a simple cream sweater and jeans, hair loose in the breeze. The transformation was disarming. She looked less like the woman who stared down boardrooms, and more like someone who belonged right there in the sunlight. "Hi," she said softly, almost unsure if she was intruding. Marcus tilted his head toward the empty space on the bench. "You're a long way from the office." She sat, clasping her hands in her lap. "I owed you a lot more than a press statement." He smirked. "I don't keep score." "Well, I do." She glanced at Lily, now chasing a squirrel along the path. "You could have walked away. No one would have blamed you. But you didn't." Marcus looked out over the river, the ripples catching the late afternoon sun. "You know, when you've been in the kind of situations I've been in, you learn one thing quick. If you can stop something bad from happening right in front of you, you stop it. Titles, money, status. None of that matters when someone's in trouble." Kate's eyes softened. "And what matters now?" He smiled faintly. "This. Watching her grow up, making sure she has a better world than the one I walked through." There was a pause, comfortable, but tinged with something unspoken. Kate turned slightly toward him. "Marcus, I want you to know that Morel Innovations isn't just my company, it's my family's legacy. My father built it from nothing. I thought I was protecting it alone. But you," she hesitated, choosing her words, "you reminded me I'm not alone." He glanced at her, sensing the sincerity, but also the subtle shift in her tone. She wasn't just thanking him for saving her. She was beginning to see him as more than the quiet man in the shadows. Before he could answer, Lily ran up, cheeks flushed from the cold, holding a crumpled leaf in her mitten. "Look, Daddy, it's shaped like a heart." Marcus took it, studying the small imperfection in its edges, and smiled. "Guess nature's on our side today." Kate laughed softly, the sound breaking whatever tension lingered between them. "Maybe it is," she said, her gaze lingering a moment longer than necessary. As the sun dipped lower, casting long golden beams across the park, Marcus knew that the storm had shifted. The media could keep their hero headlines, the investors their surging stocks, the world its hashtags. For him, redemption wasn't in the spotlight. It was here. Quiet, steady, unglamorous, where the people he cared about could finally breathe. Kate, however, left the park with a different thought. Marcus Callahan might be done with the fight, but she wasn't done with him. And this time, what she owed him was far more complicated than gratitude. Marcus Callahan had never thought of himself as a man who belonged in a corporate tower. The hum of servers, the click of heels on marble floors, the smell of freshly polished glass, it all seemed a world apart from the salt-swept docks of his childhood or the dust-choked streets where he'd carried out Navy SEAL missions. Yet here he was, standing in the top-floor office of Morel Innovations, looking out over the skyline of Boston. The city stretched before him in muted winter light, a web of possibilities. Kate sat across from him at a sleek mahogany desk, her posture poised, but her tone warmer than he'd ever heard in a business setting. "So, is that a yes?" she asked, sliding the formal contract toward him. Marcus skimmed it without haste. His eyes didn't linger on the salary, though it was generous enough to make his old maintenance paycheck look like a tip jar. What caught his attention was the clause he'd insisted on. Lily Callahan will be granted full scholarship and placement in the Morel Scholars Program, effective immediately. "That's the only way I'll take the job," he said, setting the contract down. "My work here can't cost her the childhood I promised she'd have." Kate's smile was soft, but resolute. "It's already approved. She'll start next semester." Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that this arrangement wasn't just professional, it was personal. She wasn't simply hiring an advisor, she was welcoming a father and daughter into her world. The first week as Morel Innovations' full-time security advisor was an adjustment for Marcus. He traded his faded work overalls for a tailored blazer, though he refused to give up the comfortable boots he'd worn on deployment. His days were a balance of high-level risk assessments and quiet observation, reading the flow of human movement through the building like a chessboard. Kate found excuses to check in more often than necessary. A quick stop at his office to ask about the security team's rotation schedule, a follow-up meeting about travel protocols that could have been an email. Marcus noticed, but he didn't call her on it. Truth be told, he didn't mind. One afternoon, they found themselves in the staff cafeteria. No boardroom, no suits, no titles. Just two people sitting across from each other at a corner table. Kate had a simple turkey sandwich. Marcus had brought his own lunch: rice, grilled chicken, and steamed vegetables in a plain plastic container. "You eat like a soldier," she teased. He smirked. "Old habits. Keeps me sharp." Kate leaned forward slightly. "And what keeps you happy?" Marcus hesitated, the question landing heavier than she probably intended. "Lily, knowing she's safe, knowing I'm not failing her the way I failed." He stopped himself. Kate didn't press. Instead, she reached for her iced tea, letting the pause breathe. "You haven't failed her. Not from what I've seen." For the first time in a long while, Marcus allowed himself to believe that might be true. Outside of work, their paths crossed in small, unplanned ways. A Friday evening when Marcus stopped by the community center gym and found Kate volunteering at a charity tech workshop for underprivileged teens. A Sunday morning when Kate, jogging through the park, spotted Marcus and Lily feeding ducks by the pond. Each encounter added a new layer to the picture they were building of one another. Marcus began to see Kate not just as the woman fighting to keep her company intact, but as someone who found joy in mentoring, who stayed after events to stack chairs alongside volunteers. Kate, in turn, began to see the man beneath the quiet stoicism, a father who knew every detail of his daughter's school projects, who carried her backpack without being asked, who kept a steady, patient presence that made those around him feel anchored. Still, trust, real trust, wasn't built overnight. One evening, as the city lights flickered on below the glass walls of her office, Kate invited Marcus to join her for dinner. Not at a five-star restaurant, but at a small Italian place in the North End. The tables were crowded, the waiters loud, the air thick with the smell of garlic and fresh basil. Over plates of pasta, she asked him about the missions that didn't make the news. He asked her about the moments she'd almost walked away from running Morel Innovations. They traded stories, not all of them easy, but all of them honest. When the check came, Marcus reached for it instinctively. Kate placed her hand over his. "Let me." He shook his head. "Not tonight. This one's on me." Her eyes met his, and in that moment, it wasn't about who paid for dinner. It was about something else entirely. An acknowledgement that whatever was growing between them was mutual, steady, and quietly significant. By the end of the month, Marcus had settled into his dual roles, protector of a company and father securing a better future for his child. The corporate world still felt foreign, but it no longer felt like enemy territory. For Kate, the once lonely climb of defending her family's legacy didn't feel quite so solitary anymore. She still carried the weight of leadership, but now there was someone beside her who wouldn't flinch when things got ugly. Someone who understood that protecting what mattered wasn't just a job, it was a calling. Neither of them said the word relationship. It wasn't time for that yet. But over those simple lunches, shared glances in the hallway, and moments where their conversations drifted past the safe edges of small talk, the foundation was being laid. And for the first time in a long time, both Marcus Callahan and Kate Morel began to look toward the horizon, not as two people on separate paths, but as two lives slowly, inevitably, beginning to align. Late afternoon light spilled across the park, painting everything in gold. The crisp air carried the scent of freshly cut grass and distant lilacs, while the sound of children's laughter mixed with the low hum of the city beyond. Marcus Callahan walked slowly along the winding path, one hand in his jacket pocket, the other holding Lily's small, warm hand. Kate strolled on his other side, her hair catching the sun, a rare softness in her eyes. It was the kind of moment Marcus used to think was for other people. People who hadn't seen the things he had, who hadn't lost the things he'd lost. But here it was, right in front of him. Peace. Connection. A sense that maybe, just maybe, he'd finally found where he belonged. They passed under a row of tall maples when a sharp cry cut through the air. A boy, no older than 8, had swerved too hard on his bicycle. The front wheel caught on the edge of the path, and in an instant, he tumbled to the ground. The bike clattered beside him, and the boy sat frozen, too stunned to cry. Marcus didn't think. He never did when it came to someone in trouble. In 2 strides, he was kneeling beside the boy. "Easy, buddy," Marcus said gently, his voice low and steady. "Let's check you out." He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, scanning for injuries. No broken bones, just a scraped knee and a bruised ego. Marcus lifted the bike upright, then extended a hand to the boy. "You're okay. You just took a little detour." The boy hesitated, then took Marcus's hand. With a careful pull, Marcus helped him to his feet. "You know," Marcus added, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Sometimes the biggest victory isn't winning a race. It's just keeping someone from falling." The boy grinned shyly before pedaling away, his parents waving their thanks from a nearby bench. Lily's grip on Marcus's hand tightened. "That's what you do, isn't it, Dad? You keep people from falling." Marcus glanced down at her, his throat tightening just a bit. "I try, kiddo." Kate, watching from a few steps back, smiled. Not the polite public smile she wore in boardrooms, but something warmer, deeper. "And you do it without making it about you," she said softly. He shrugged, eyes still on the path ahead. "I've had enough headlines for one lifetime. I don't need anyone to know my name." They walked on, the moment settling into a quiet rhythm. Kate slipped her arm through his, her shoulder brushing against his, in a way that felt natural now. Lily swung their joined hands with each step, humming a tune only she knew. In the distance, the city skyline rose, glass and steel catching the fading light. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here, from the chaos of Basra to the maintenance rooms of a Boston high-rise, from standing in the shadows to standing beside people he cared about. He thought about the battles that didn't make the news, the quiet decisions to protect without recognition, the small acts of kindness no one applauded. Those were the victories that mattered. Kate seemed to read his thoughts. "You know, the world could use more people like you," he chuckled. "The world has plenty of heroes. Most of them just don't wear uniforms." As they rounded the bend, the park opened into a wide green lawn. Families picnicked on blankets, kids chased each other through the grass, and the low sun set the edges of everything aglow. Kate stopped and looked at him, really looked, as if trying to memorize the lines of his face. "You've changed the way I see things, Marcus. You didn't just protect me. You showed me what strength really looks like." He shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the weight of the words, but met her gaze. "Strength isn't about how many people you can knock down. It's about how many you can lift up." Lily leaned her head against his arm, and for a long moment they stood there, 3 figures in the golden light, connected not by contracts or battles fought, but by the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. The camera would pull back now, if there were one, slowly widening until Marcus, Kate, and Lily were just part of the tapestry of life in the park, the laughter of children, the sway of the trees, the hum of the city blending into something timeless. No spotlight, no headlines, just a man who had once been trained to win wars, now choosing every day to win peace for the people he loved. And as the light dipped lower, Marcus Callahan knew. The greatest strength he'd ever wielded wasn't the power to defeat 50 men. It was the power to protect one. And that's where our story leaves them, walking forward together, with hope in their hearts. I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from today? Share it in the comments so we can see just how far these stories travel. If you'd like to join us for more moments of courage, love, and kindness, you're always welcome to subscribe. Thank you, truly, for spending your time here with me today. Your presence means more than you know.